figured out after all these years that not only was I raised on cartoons and other shows from the 1980s, but that many of them aired on CBS. I've said before that CBS was the gold standard for Saturday mornings at this time, and that was largely due to them having 3 of the biggest, longest-running Saturday morning series in the 80s through the 90s. Muppet Babies, Garfield and Friends, and the original Ninja Turtles cartoon. However, that doesn't mean that CBS never had its own problems with its animation lineup in the early 80s. As I mentioned last time, the network picked up the reruns of Shirt Tales in 1984 and placed it within its earliest Saturday morning hour for that season. But they ended up pulling the show by the spring and replaced it with the very show that had previously been in that time slot. Which begs the question, what show could have been bad enough that it would be replaced by Shirt Tales, only to then replace the show it was replaced with before the next season even started? You think that comment was crazy? Prepare yourself for just how crazy the Biskitts was.
Hidden deep in a swamp lies tiny Biskitt Castle. Home of the smallest dogs in the world, the Biskitts.
What the hell was that? Yep, this is how our show begins, people. The title sequence starts out with this supposedly ominous setting, and then quickly switches over to some calliope version of Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2. You know, that song that Daffy and Donald dueled over in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and was used in a famous Tom and Jerry short that might have been ripped off from a Bugs Bunny short, or vice versa? Cartoon history is crazy, let's move on. That being said, at least this title sequence does a decent job of summarizing the show itself without being excessively long in exposition. Still, you have to wonder how many kids watched this and thought, hey, we can hunt down and get our own little tiny pet dog if we just go running around in the swamp outside. Sure, you just have to worry about the mosquitoes and the alligators and the toxic waste dumped in the water that will give you 17 different types of cancer. Anyway, just what is the concept of this show? Well, apparently the Biskitts are these tiny dogs who live in this fantasy medieval setting and were designated the guardians of the treasures of kings past, because I guess those kings didn't trust their descendants to their inheritance. Insert your own Paris Hilton joke here. But that's actually part of the plot, as the Biskitts are being pursued by this evil king named Max.
What kind of stupid name is that?
Who, despite being a king, is completely broke and is thus trying to find Biskitt Castle and the treasure within. Hey, it's no joke. Just because you're a king doesn't mean the property taxes on a castle aren't murder. Now, supposedly, Max is the younger brother of the previous king, who was a good friend of the Biskitts. Because of his wasteful ways, Max was never crowned ruler of the Biskitts' land, and thus only rules the neighboring land of Lower Suburbia, and thus feels he's entitled to the Biskitts' treasure. Oh, did I mention all of that information came from Wikipedia and other online sources? Because I don't recall any of it mentioned at any point in an actual episode. Thanks for not bringing up any of that or showing any type of backstory. We wouldn't have wanted to see anything, you know, interesting. So most episodes feature Max coming up with some new cockamamie scheme to capture the Biskitts and learn the location of their castle with the aid of his court jester and his 2 dogs. These plans go about as well as you would expect from an 80s cartoon.
At last, the hidden chamber!
This doesn't seem to be the treasure chamber.
And what was your first clue? Oh, my trap! What's wrong with my trap?
Seems to be working perfectly.
I've got them! I've got them! Quit struggling, you little swamp bear!
Still, give this character role this much credit. At least Kenneth Mars got to practice playing a loudmouth asshole king that would benefit him a few years later. That's not to say Max is the only main villain. There's also this feral cat named Scratch who wants to eat the little creatures.
Help! Lunch at last! Ouch! Ooh! These rocks are sharp! Serves you right, Scratch! Right into a jam! Trapped by a hidden pit. You should have stayed in the kennel, furballs! Now you're cat food!
And one watching this just might ask, with all the times he gets them cornered, why he doesn't just immediately start gobbling them rather than stand around gloating, giving them a chance to hatch an escape plan every time. But given that most cats play with their prey before eating, that actually makes too much sense. Hey, no, he has a point. Yeah, well, still, cheap shot. At least I can't recall an episode where he actually did swallow one of them and said doggy actually fought his way out of the cat's stomach. I mean, in a show about 6-inch talking dogs that ride around on frogs and swans, we need to have some form of grounded realism. As far as the main Biskitt characters go, I will concede that they do a slightly better job than Shirt Tails in showing off their different personalities. Wags is clearly the leader of the group, and they actually have as many as 3 females in Lady, Sweets, and Wiggles. Though outside of Lady being high maintenance, there's not much difference between the 3 of them. Spinner is the old wise one, Scat is the excited kid character we always have to have, and Downer is basically the Eeyore of the group, always moping and certain something bad is going to happen. That leaves us with Shiner, the resident grumbler of the group. And this is another case where I must give the show credit. Because of all the complainer characters made for cartoons in this time, he's probably the one that works the best as far as making us not like him. He's always shirking his responsibilities and getting others to do the chores he was assigned in exchange for him doing something less taxing, shall we say.
Forget Wags. A bright guy like you should be up here where the action is. Yeah, I'll check the cavern for you.
Gee, thanks, Shiner. I think.
Even still, he views himself a better leader than Wags, and the only time he's willing to do anything hard is if it's to possibly impress Sweets, who he clearly is crushing on.
Oh, Wags, you were so brave rescuing Shiner like that.
Him? What about me? I'm the one who stood up to Scratch and Maxie over and over and over. I'm the genuine hero, and what do I get? Nothing. That's what I get. Nothing. Hey! I'm in trouble here! Stop this log!
But that's about it. There are no major story arcs, which admittedly shouldn't be expected in a cartoon of this time. It's just each episode usually focusing on 1 or 2 of the Biskitts having to overcome some personal obstacle. Like when Wiggles gets a crush on Wags and thus tries to get herself in trouble so Wags can rescue her. Basically the plot of every single issue of Superman's girl Lois Lane. And then, of course, there's the surprise party episode. You know, that tired old plot where everyone pretends to forget it's someone's birthday because they're actually planning a surprise party for him, and it causes him to get all depressed and run away because he thinks his friends no longer care about him enough. Why do I get the feeling this won't be the only time I'll bring it up this summer? It's just basic fluff like this while dealing with Max and or Scratch acting like Gargamel and Azrael. Wait a minute. Now that I think about it, this does seem kind of familiar. We have a clan of minuscule fantasy creatures of all different personalities and how they live amongst each other dealing with these personality clashes. Meanwhile, they are being regularly hunted down by someone who wants to use them to boost his own wealth and power. Oh, for crying out out loud, Hannah! It's bad enough that you ripped off Scooby-Doo with almost every single one of your cartoons in the 70s, but now you have to go and rip off the Smurfs? I'm serious. Tell me this isn't the exact same concept as the Smurfs. Hell, this one might be worse because at least with the Scooby clones, HB was copying something they actually owned, while the Smurfs were characters they only held the license to adapt from a European comic strip. To be fair, it does seem like another studio may have ripped off this concept. That would be Disney when they made Adventures of the Gummy Bears 2 years later. Because it wouldn't be animation without ripping off everybody. I guess though we can forgive Gummy Bears since that show actually succeeded, while the Biskitts, of course, only got the one 13-episode season, getting that brief revival in reruns after the show we talked about last time drew even less of an audience. And such is the legacy of the Biskitts. It wasn't as bad as Shirt Tales. I don't think I can call this show terrible, but it definitely is bizarre. The characters are interesting enough to be compelling at times, and the antagonist is no more of a bumbling, ineffectual villain than many others of this time I could think of. But the lack of backstory to many of those characters just leaves you with the sense that this could have been more. This is one show I actually think could be rebooted nowadays with some success. Much like the He-Man series from 2002 added more depth to that franchise. For now, though, you're only left with its availability through the Warner Archive collection for this one tidbit as to just how strange the cartoons of the early 80s actually were. But still, the likes of the Biskitts and Shirt Tales were just that. Tidbits of early 80s animation that have long been forgotten by many. There was one other cartoon, of course, from this same time period that has lived on in much more infamy. And yes, that's the one we're taking on next time.